The Krath Dominion ship arrived at Station Aurelis with a kind of noise that made everyone stop what they were doing. The docking clamps shook, panels clicked, and the glow of the ship's engines filled half the bay. A group of workers stood in a corner, whispering to each other as the visitors prepared to come. Aboard, everyone knew their reputation. They were not friendly, they were not patient, and they were definitely not known for handling problems. Calmly, the commander of that ship, an alien named Vihor Tal, stepped out first. He was tall, wearing heavy armor, and carried himself like someone who believed the entire galaxy existed only to follow his orders. People moved out of his way before he even asked. Some alien diplomats lowered their eyes as a sign of respect or fear. Humans often earned strange looks from the Krath, mostly because the Krath did not understand how humans survived on a world full of danger. To them, Earth was a death world, a place where only wild creatures should live. Yet humans were there, alive and adapting, and the galaxy couldn't understand how or why they grew stronger in such harsh conditions. On that day, one human worker was on duty in the docking bay. He was a quiet person, the type who preferred staying out of trouble. Let's call him the technician, because his real name wasn't important to the galaxy. At least not yet. His job was to monitor the docking systems, make sure the clamps locked correctly, and keep the incoming ships stable. It was routine work, nothing heroic or special. But as often happens, trouble never sends a warning before it arrives. Just a few minutes before the Krath ship docked, one of the docking arm sensors began giving weak readings. The technician noticed it on his panel. It wasn't broken, but it was responding slower than usual. He knew he had to correct it, or the ship could shake a little during landing, which might annoy the crew. Still, he did the best he could. The problem? The sensor update caused a small delay, just a few seconds. Nothing dangerous. Nothing dramatic. But the commander did not care about details. All he cared about was that he had to wait, and he hated waiting. When the docking platforms finally aligned, the doors opened, and Viortal marched into the bay with firm, heavy steps. He didn't stop to check if there was an emergency. He didn't ask if something had gone wrong. He simply walked straight up to the human technician, as if he already knew who to blame. The tech stood by his console, double-checking numbers, unaware that a storm was coming at him. When he finally looked up, the alien commander was already towering over him. "Explain the delay," Vihortal said in a low voice. The technician blinked in confusion. "Delay?" he asked. "Oh, yes. A sensor was slow. I fixed it." The commander's eyes narrowed, glowing faintly through his helmet visor. For him, this was not a good enough answer. He expected apologies, fear, and a long list of excuses. But the technician spoke in an ordinary, calm tone, as if he was talking about the weather. Vihortal's jaw tightened. The crowd in the bay could feel the tension rising. Workers paused mid-task. A few visitors stopped walking and pretended to check their devices, though their eyes kept drifting toward the confrontation. No. One liked to get in Vihortal's way. No. One liked to talk back to him. No one liked to look him in the eye. But the human technician, being who he was, didn't show fear. He wasn't trying to be brave or bold. He simply didn't understand why such a small delay mattered so much to the alien commander. That alone was enough to irritate Vihortal further. For a long second, the commander stared at him, breathing slowly through a filtered mask. Then, without asking another question, he lifted his arm and struck the technician across the face. It wasn't a violent attack, no harsh injury, nothing that crossed safety limits. It was more of a humiliating gesture, a symbolic act common in Krath culture. Among their own people, a slap wasn't meant to seriously hurt anyone. It was meant to show dominance, meant to tell the other person, "You are beneath me," But humans didn't work like that. They didn't live in a world where physical insults were normal communication. On Earth, a sudden hit, even a mild one, meant something else entirely. The technician stumbled back a step. His hand went to his cheek. It wasn't painful, just surprising. The crowd gasped softly. Someone dropped a toolbox. A few aliens exchanged nervous glances. The station guards didn't move. They weren't sure if they should. Everyone knew the craft carried diplomatic permission to deal with their own soldiers as they saw fit. Interfering might start an argument with the Dominion, but humans were new to the galaxy, and not everyone understood them yet. They didn't know how humans reacted under pressure, or what might follow if one was pushed too far. The technician lowered his hand and looked at the commander. His expression didn't show anger. He didn't shout or complain. He simply straightened himself, took a slow breath, and stood tall, not aggressive, not weak, just steady. That quiet reaction was somehow more unsettling than shouting would have been. Alien diplomats, watching from the side, whispered to one another. They had seen many species react with fear after being struck by a craft officer. But a calm human? That was new. The Horta mistook the calmness for submission. He let out a short growl, a sound his species used to show satisfaction after disciplining someone. He turned slightly, expecting the technician to stay silent and obedient. But the human spoke. Only 4 words, clear, steady, and strangely polite. "Don't do that again." The entire bay went silent. Even the machines stopped their clanking, as if they too were listening. The technician didn't raise his voice. He didn't threaten anyone. He didn't even move closer. But something about his tone, something cold and steady, sent a small shiver through the crowd. Some species were incredibly sensitive to emotional cues. They could smell tension, hear tiny changes in breathing, sense the energy in a room. At that moment, almost everyone felt a sudden shift. It was faint, but real, like a quiet warning before a storm. No one knew what would happen next. No one knew whether the commander would walk away or react even more harshly. But everyone felt the atmosphere change the moment the human spoke. Technician wasn't trying to be intimidating. He didn't puff out his chest or clench his fists. He simply stood there like someone who held a firm boundary, as if saying, "Respect goes both ways." Bihortal stared at him again, shocked that a soft-skinned Deathworlder, as he liked to call humans, dared to speak back. The commander wasn't used to disagreement. He wasn't used to being told no. And he definitely wasn't used to being warned, especially not by a species the Dominion still considered new and untested. He lifted his chin, preparing to deliver a lecture about power, strength, and galactic order. But before he could finish that thought, several aliens nearby felt something, a strange instinctive message passing through the room. Some took a small step backward without even knowing why. The human technician, still standing calmly, simply watched. Not scared, not angry, just aware. Something in his posture told the galaxy that the situation had changed. And though nobody knew it yet, this small moment, this tiny delay, this misunderstood slap, this quiet warning was about to become one of the most repeated stories across the stars. But that was still in the future. For now, everyone waited to see whether the commander would back down or escalate the situation into something the whole galaxy would soon witness. The docking bay stayed silent for several long seconds after the human technician spoke those 4 quiet words. "Don't do that again." He didn't shout. He didn't clench his fists. He didn't even raise his voice. The tone changed everything. People who were standing far behind equipment stacks leaned slightly forward, trying to hear what would happen next. A few aliens who had been busy loading crates suddenly pretended to check inventory. though their eyes kept jumping toward the technician and the commander. Even the automatic cleaning drones paused in their tracks, as if the entire station was holding its breath. The technician's posture was calm, almost gentle. He didn't look like someone preparing for trouble. He looked like someone who was simply stating a boundary. But the simplicity of that boundary carried a strange weight, something the other species couldn't quite understand, but instinctively respected. Across the bay, two small reptilian workers whispered nervously. "He didn't show fear," one said. "That is not normal," the other replied. They had worked with humans before. Humans laughed loudly, shared snacks, and talked endlessly. But they could also go very still at moments when other species would panic. That calmness was more unsettling than anger. The alien commander Vihor Tal wasn't used to being spoken to like this, especially not by a human technician. He stared down at the human with a look that mixed surprise, confusion, and disbelief. To him, a member of the Krath Dominion, confidence from a smaller species was challenging, almost insulting. But what made him hesitate wasn't the words. It was the way the human said them. Calm, clear, steady, not aggressive, but not submissive either. The commander opened his mouth to reply, but nothing came out at first. He didn't understand humans well. Few from his species did. They saw humans as unpredictable, laughing one moment, serious the next, and capable of adapting faster than many older species. The technician stood waiting, breathing slowly, as if giving Vihor Tal a chance to respond in a reasonable way. It wasn't a challenge. It was simply patience, something the Krath struggled with. A few diplomats, standing near the back, exchanged concerned glances. They had seen these kinds of misunderstandings before. Cultural differences could turn tiny moments into huge conflicts. And right now, this was one of those moments. One diplomat, a tall, feathered alien, whispered softly to her colleague, "This is the part where we usually step in." "But humans react differently," the colleague replied. "We don't want to make it worse." That was the truth. Humans were new to the galactic community, and though they had signed peace agreements and open trade routes, the galaxy had not yet fully learned the details of human behavior. For example, they didn't realize that humans had mastered something powerful: controlled calmness. When threatened, many species showed fear. Others showed aggression. But humans could show nothing, and that nothing was often far more intimidating. The commander finally forced out a breath through his mask. "You dare give orders to me?" he said. His voice wasn't loud, but it was sharp like the edge of a cold blade. The technician shook his head. "It wasn't an order," he said quietly. "It was a simple request." Some of the onlookers frowned. They didn't understand why the technician was still so calm. They didn't understand why he didn't step back. They also didn't understand how someone so gentle-looking could speak so firmly without raising their voice. Humans, in general, gave off a sense of unpredictability, mostly because other species weren't used to the idea of someone standing their ground without hostility. On Earth, it was normal. Across the galaxy, it was strange. Vihor Tal misread the moment completely. He thought the technician was pretending to be brave. He thought humans were trying to test him. He believed the calmness meant disrespect, not self-control. So instead of stepping back, the commander took one step forward. That single step changed the mood. Instantly, you could feel it. Something invisible in the air shifted, like a silent vibration that only instincts could detect. Several aliens felt their skin crawl. A few took one tiny step backward without even realizing they did it. Nothing violent had happened. No one had raised a hand. No one had shouted. Yet, every creature in that room sensed that the moment had reached a dangerous edge. The commander leaned in slightly, towering over the human. "Do you know who I am?" he asked. The technician nodded politely. "You're a visitor on this station," he said. "And visitors should treat people with respect." Again, no anger. No fear. Just honesty. It stunned the crowd. They weren't used to honesty spoken so simply in the face of authority. Be her. Tal's chest rose as he drew in a deeper breath. He interpreted the technician's words as a direct challenge. In Kroth culture, words could start conflicts, and standing tall while speaking them made it worse. But the technician wasn't trying to challenge anyone. He was only trying to keep things fair. The silence stretched across the bay again, growing longer, tighter. A few small machines beeped softly in the background, sounding strangely loud in the tension-filled quiet. Then something happened that pulled everyone's attention. The technician shifted his stance, not aggressively, just adjusted his balance, as if preparing to brace himself. It was a tiny movement, almost invisible. But many species were prey animals in their evolutionary history. They had instincts that reacted sharply to even the smallest change in posture. Those instincts woke up instantly. A bird-like worker near the cargo lift whispered, "He moved." "Why did he move like that?" Her partner replied, "That is how a creature moves before doing something dangerous." But the technician didn't look dangerous. He looked steady, focused, calm. He quietly said a few more words, barely above a whisper, yet heard clearly by everyone nearby. "I don't want trouble." And he meant it. You could hear it in his tone. You could see it in his eyes. He didn't want to fight. He didn't want to escalate the moment. He just wanted respect and space. But sometimes misunderstandings don't need force. They only need pride and ego. And Vihor Tal had a lot of both. The commander straightened his shoulders, making himself seem larger. He considered himself a figure of power in the galaxy. He believed other species should bow or step aside or apologize the moment he showed displeasure. So in his mind, the technician's calmness wasn't peace. It was defiance. He raised his hand slightly, not to strike, but as a gesture of dominance in his culture, something meant to communicate that the conversation was over. But to humans, raising a hand like that, well, it didn't carry the same meaning. To humans, it usually meant someone was about to repeat a previous action, and that previous action had been a slap. The technician noticed the commander's hand rising. His eyes narrowed just a little, not in anger, but in focus. He looked at the commander's arm, then at his face, and took a slow breath. A few aliens nearby could feel something happening, something they couldn't describe. It wasn't physical. It wasn't visible. It was more like a shift in emotional pressure, like the moment before lightning strikes. Quiet, but powerful. The technician spoke again. A soft voice, a calm voice, but this time there was something final about it. "Please, don't make this worse." The words were simple, but the meaning behind them was not. Everyone in the docking bay felt it. Every species sensed that the moment had reached its peak, that whatever happened next would decide the future of the entire situation. Some held their breath. Some slowly stepped back. Some whispered prayers or warnings, but the commander did not step back. He didn't pause. He didn't reconsider. He lifted his hand higher, and the human technician slowly straightened his posture, his eyes focusing with a calmness that shook the entire bay. No one knew it yet, but those next few seconds would soon be remembered across the galaxy. The docking bay felt strangely quiet, as if the air itself had gone still. Every worker, every visitor, every small cleaning drone seemed to pause the moment the alien commander raised his hand a second. Time. Nothing had happened yet. No hit. No push. No real conflict. But everyone in the bay could feel that. They were standing on the edge of something big, something that could go very wrong if even one person made a wrong move. Human technician stood in the center of that growing tension. He didn't look scared. He didn't look angry. His face showed the same calm steadiness he had shown from the beginning. It was the kind of calmness that didn't shout or threaten. It simply existed, firm and quiet. The aliens watching from the sides had never seen a human act this way under pressure. Usually, they saw humans laugh things off, make jokes, or talk their way out of awkward moments. But this was different. This human wasn't joking. He wasn't laughing. He was simply focused, like a person who had decided that enough was enough, but in a controlled, peaceful way. Some alien workers exchanged worried whispers. "What is he doing?" One asked. "Humans don't act like this unless something serious is happening." Another replied. A small maintenance robot rolling past the scene stopped and beeped twice, confused by the sudden lack of movement in its path. A few tiny lights blinked on its panel as it tried to understand why so many people were frozen like statues. Vihor Tal, the commander, didn't understand the atmosphere around him. His species was used to clear signals, loud voices, big gestures, displays of strength. Subtle warnings and quiet firm tones were not part of Croth communication. So when the technician calmly said, "Please don't make this worse," the commander didn't take it as a warning. He took it as a challenge. His hand rose a little higher, not in a violent way, but in a culturally dominant gesture. Among his people, raising a hand like that simply meant, "Stop talking. I haven't finished speaking yet." It wasn't meant as an attack, but the problem was simple. The technician didn't come from the commander's culture. He came from Earth, from a species that read body language very differently. The moment the commander lifted his hand, several spectators tensed automatically. They didn't want to see things go wrong. Some stepped back behind crates or equipment, trying to avoid being in the middle if an argument broke out. But the technician didn't step back. He adjusted his position only slightly, just enough to show he was aware, but not afraid. That tiny movement sent another wave of instinctive reactions across the room. Many aliens came from prey species, and they were incredibly sensitive to body signals. A slight shift in weight, the angle of someone's shoulders, even the way someone inhaled these small signs told them when a creature was preparing to defend themselves. One alien diplomat whispered, "He moved like a trained guardian." Another replied softly, "But he said earlier he was just a technician." They didn't realize yet that on Earth, even ordinary people grew up with instincts shaped by a difficult world storms. Dangerous animals, unpredictable nature. Humans didn't need to be soldiers to understand how to stay balanced, how to stay aware, how to read danger. It was built into them. The commander took another strong step forward, closing the distance between them. His armor clicked softly with each movement, echoing through the bay. He loomed over the technician, towering like a shadow, but the technician didn't move an inch. His expression didn't change. He simply looked straight ahead, meeting the commander's gaze without flinching. That simple act, the act of holding someone's gaze, shocked several aliens nearby. Many species considered direct eye contact extremely bold, even risky. But humans used eye contact for something else. Honesty, steadiness, a sign that they weren't hiding or pretending. The commander took the eye contact as something else entirely. He interpreted it as a refusal to acknowledge his authority, a refusal to show respect, a refusal to be intimidated. "You stand in my way," the commander said, his voice low and slow. The technician replied quietly, "I stand in my own place. You walked into it." The line wasn't spoken sharply or dramatically. It was spoken simply, like a fact. And that made it even more surprising. No anger, no sarcasm, just truth. The crowd murmured softly. Some species found human honesty strangely brave. Others found it confusing. But what everyone agreed on was that the human technician was not trying to cause a scene. He was simply refusing to be treated unfairly. The commander lowered his hand slightly, not out of understanding, but out of irritation. He didn't know what to do with someone who remained calm, even when facing a larger, armored figure. Among the craft, people usually backed down or bowed their heads. But here stood a human straight, still, unshaken, double quote, "You think I will accept your tone?" The commander asked. The technician blinked slowly. He didn't look impressed. He didn't look afraid. He looked patient. "My tone is calm," he said quietly. Calm is not disrespect. That sentence traveled across the room like a ripple. Some aliens nodded. They understood that statement deeply. They wished the commander understood it, too. But Viortal didn't understand. His culture valued loudness. Strength. Obvious display of dominance. So the technician's calmness felt like an insult. The commander drew in a breath, preparing to lecture the human, when the technician said something that froze everyone again. "You have 5 seconds to lower your hand." He said it in such a soft, steady tone that it didn't sound like a threat. It sounded like a suggestion from someone trying very hard to stop things from going out of control. The words confused the commander. 5 seconds? Lower his hand? Why 5? The aliens watching understood the feeling behind the words. Even if the human did not look angry, there was something final about his tone. Something that said, "I do not want this to continue. Please stop before it becomes worse for both of us." The technician didn't raise his voice. He didn't step forward. He didn't clench his fists. He simply gave the commander a chance, a peaceful way out. Few aliens whispered anxiously. He warned him. "Why 5 seconds? That human looks too calm." Some moved even farther back, sensing something important was about to happen. Not something harmful, but something decisive. The commander didn't step back. Instead, he frowned deeply behind his mask. "You dare count time for me?" The technician gave a slow nod. "It's the fairest warning I can give." The words seemed simple, but they carried a strong meaning. He wasn't trying to dominate anyone. He wasn't trying to embarrass the commander. He was trying to prevent a bigger problem from happening. He lifted his hand slightly and gently showed 5 fingers. No dramatic movement, just a clear signal. And then he started counting slowly in a calm, steady voice. 5. A few aliens gasped quietly. The commander was frozen in confusion, not knowing how to respond. 4. The technician's voice did not rise. It remained soft, like someone explaining instructions. Several workers stepped behind crates. 3. The commander's hand twitched, unsure whether to lower it or keep it raised. 2. Every eye in the bay was locked on the commander now. Would he choose pride or peace? 1. The human technician lowered his hand, not in threat, just signaling that the count was over. The commander still hadn't moved, and the air in the bay felt electric, filled with a silent tension that made hearts race. What would happen next? Would the commander understand the meaning behind the warning? Would he choose to step back? Would he realize how close he was to making a huge mistake? No one knew. No one breathed. No one dared to interrupt. The technician stood quietly, waiting for the commander's choice. And that simple waiting, the calm, unshaken patience, was more powerful than any loud voice or dramatic action. It was the moment that would soon change how the whole galaxy saw humans. The air inside the docking bay felt heavy, almost like it was waiting for something important to happen. Everyone's eyes stayed locked on the human technician and the alien commander. It didn't matter if they were workers, diplomats, traders, or travelers, every single person felt a strange energy in the air. The technician had counted down slowly. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. He had given the commander every chance to step back, every chance to calm down, every chance to avoid turning a misunderstanding into a bigger mess. But the commander, stiff with pride and confusion, still had his hand raised. He didn't know what the countdown meant. To him, it felt like an insult, like someone trying to teach him something he didn't want to learn. The technician's calmness didn't help the commander understand the situation. Craft culture didn't rely on quiet warnings. Their people believed in loud voices, dramatic gestures, and heavy stomps. Subtlety didn't exist in their communication style. Because of that, the human's gentle warnings had gone completely over his head. Around them, aliens shifted nervously. Some moved behind containers. Some hid behind holographic panels. Some simply held onto the rails of nearby walkways. The tension felt like a rope pulled so tight that the smallest tug could snap it. But the human technician didn't seem tense at all. His shoulders were relaxed. His breathing was slow. His expression was steady. He wasn't preparing for a fight. He was preparing to prevent one. The quiet after the countdown lasted only a moment, but it felt long enough to stretch into minutes. The commander looked around, confused by why everyone was watching him so carefully. Why did the workers look tense? Why did some diplomats look worried? Why did a few tiny creatures cling to walls as if danger was approaching? The commander didn't understand that humans had a way of communicating through body language that many other species didn't recognize until it was too late. Calmness, focus, balance, all these things meant the human was aware and ready, but not aggressive. Finally, the commander lowered his hand slightly, not because he understood the warning, but because he wanted to show he was still in control. He stepped forward again, trying to appear stronger and taller than he already was. That step forward changed the atmosphere instantly. The technician's eyes sharpened, not in anger, but in alertness. His feet shifted again, almost invisible unless someone was watching closely. Some alien spectators noticed, and their instincts kicked in. He moved like that again, whispered a small reptilian worker. "This is how humans act when something unexpected is about to happen," replied a tall insectoid diplomat. The human technician didn't intend to look threatening. He simply reacted to motion like anyone trained to stay aware of their surroundings. Many humans learned this naturally, even without training. Life on Earth taught people to sense danger long before it arrived. When the commander stepped too close, the technician instinctively raised his hand a tiny bit, not in aggression, but in a protective reflex. His palm opened, not clenched. His posture lowered slightly, like someone preparing to keep balance rather than attack. The commander didn't understand the gesture. To him, any movement of the hand meant disrespect. He believed the technician was trying to challenge him. He tried to grab the technician's shoulder to push him aside again, not in a harmful way, but in a forceful, dominant one. But before his hand could make contact, something surprising happened. The technician moved, not fast enough to scare anyone, not violently. Not in a way that caused harm. But with a smooth, practiced motion that spoke of balance and awareness. He stepped sideways and lifted his arm in a gentle arc that guided the commander's hand away, like redirecting a falling branch. Instead of stopping an attack, there was no hit. No shove. No harm. But the commander's hand missed its target and ended up sliding past the technician instead. He stumbled half a step forward, surprised by the smooth friction. His boots scuffed lightly on the floor. The entire bay gasped, not because something violent happened, but because something didn't. They expected noise. Impact. Conflict. Instead, they saw a human redirect a situation, like someone calming a startled animal. The technician spoke softly. "Please, don't touch me." His voice was gentle enough to calm many in the room, but it also carried strength, like someone who knew exactly what they were doing. The commander stared at him, shock visible even through the mask. He wasn't used to being outmaneuvered, not physically, not mentally, and definitely not this quietly. "How did you—" The commander began. "It's just a reflex," the technician said, still calm. "You moved too close." The workers watching murmured softly. They had expected a fight. Instead, they saw something almost peaceful, a human showing control without force, and strength without anger. Many species didn't understand how humans could move like that. To them, humans looked soft, fragile, friendly. But moments like this reminded the galaxy why humans had survived so well on their wild planet. They were adaptable, they were aware, they were fast, not in a dangerous way, but in a natural, instinctive way. The commander pulled his hand back, surprised. This time, his movement was slower, more cautious. For the first time since stepping off his ship, he looked unsure. "You avoided my hand," he said, sounding more confused than offended. "I didn't avoid you," the technician replied in a respectful tone. "I avoided trouble." That simple statement traveled across the docking bay like a wave. Some aliens nodded in agreement, some blinked in amazement, some realized that humans were far more complex than they looked. The commander took a step back, trying to understand what had just happened. He wasn't used to being redirected without resistance. His people believed that strength meant pushing forward. But the human had shown strength by simply stepping aside. He felt embarrassed, not because the human humiliated him, but because he had misjudged the entire situation from the beginning. "This is how your species handles conflict?" he asked. "Not always," the technician replied honestly. "But when I can avoid harm, I do." A few alien observers whispered softly, impressed by the answer. The technician continued, "I don't want to fight you. I just want respect. That's all." The commander looked around the room, seeing how many eyes were watching him, not out of fear, but out of curiosity. Slowly, his shoulders lowered. His posture softened. He took a long breath, the kind that sounded like he was letting go of frustration he carried for too long. "I misunderstood your warning," he finally said. "It happens," the technician replied. "Different cultures, different ways of speaking." The commander's gaze lowered slightly, something his species rarely did, as lowering the head was considered a sign of humility. But at this point, he didn't care about traditions. He cared about understanding what he had just experienced. "You moved so fast," he said quietly. "And yet, you did not harm me." "I didn't want to," the technician said. "Peace is always better." The entire bay relaxed. People let out breaths. Workers returned to their tasks. Drones resumed cleaning. But the diplomats? They watched the technician with new eyes, filled with respect and awe, because in those few seconds, the technician had shown something beautiful: strength without violence, confidence without pride, control without harm, and the galaxy, watching quietly, learned something important about humans that day. Humans weren't dangerous because they fought. They were powerful because they chose not to. The docking bay slowly returned to its normal rhythm, but the atmosphere still felt different, almost softer. People walked around again. Machines hummed, and scanners beeped in the background, but every now and then, someone would glance at the human technician and the alien commander as if they were watching the end of a meaningful scene in a movie. But the moment wasn't over yet. The commander stood quietly, still trying to understand everything that had happened. He wasn't used to silence. His homeworld was full of loud conversations, echoing halls, and big gestures. But here, in this human space, silence didn't feel empty. It felt thoughtful. After a few seconds, the commander finally asked, "How did you learn to do that? That movement you used to avoid my hand?" The technician looked almost embarrassed by the attention. He simply shrugged as if what he did wasn't impressive at all. "It's something humans learn without thinking," he replied. "You know, when someone moves too close or too fast, the body reacts. It's just instinct." The commander stared at him. "Instinct? That was instinct?" "Pretty much," the technician said with a small smile. "Our world is full of surprises. You learn to stay aware." Some workers nearby nodded knowingly, as if they completely understood what the technician meant. Even a few alien diplomats leaned in, curious about human instincts. The technician continued, "Humans don't always react the same way. Some freeze, some step back, some step to the side. But most of us learn how to avoid trouble without harming anyone." The commander considered that for a long moment. To him, instincts were things you used in battle or survival training. But this human had used instinct to prevent conflict, not start one. That idea alone was new for him. Finally, he asked, "Do all humans move like that?" The technician laughed softly. "No, some trip over their own shoes." A few aliens chuckled at the joke, relieved that the mood had shifted into something lighter. The tension melted away like ice meeting warm sunlight. The commander tilted his head. "But you moved calmly, as if you knew what I would do before I did it." "It's just experience," the technician explained. "Working in spaceports teaches you to read people. And you were standing pretty close." That comment sparked a tiny wave of whispers among the aliens. "See? Humans notice everything," whispered a furry dock worker. "It's their eyes. They don't miss details." Another replied, "I heard humans can tell if someone is upset by how they breathe." Someone added, The technician overheard the murmuring and smiled politely, trying not to draw more attention. But the commander seemed fascinated. He stepped closer again, this time slowly and with respect. "I misread your calmness. On my planet, stillness means challenge. On mine," the technician said, "stillness means thinking." The commander tapped his chest lightly. "My people speak louder. We stomp to show confidence. We raise our arms to show authority." "I noticed," the technician replied kindly. "I thought you were just stretching." A ripple of laughter spread through the room, not mean laughter, but warm, friendly laughter that broke the last layer of tension. The commander blinked in surprise, then let out a sound that might have been his species' version of a laugh. It was deep and strange, but genuine. "I see now," he said. "Your warning. The countdown. I thought you were threatening me, but you were trying to help." "Yes," the technician said softly. "I didn't want an accident, and I didn't want either of us to feel disrespected." The commander took a slow breath, his posture changing from defensive to open. His shoulders lowered, his hands relaxed. The ridges on his face softened. He looked less like a warrior now, and more like someone who was ready to listen. "You humans," he said carefully, "are different than I expected." The technician raised an eyebrow. "Different good or different strange?" "Both," the commander said honestly. "You look soft, but somehow you aren't." That comment made a few aliens nod again. Some had learned this lesson before. Others had only heard stories. But now, watching the technician stand calmly in the middle of the docking bay, they understood it clearly. "You are gentle," the commander continued, "but you know how to protect yourselves. You avoid conflict, but you are not afraid of it. You move quietly, yet everyone notices when you shift your weight. I do not understand your kind completely." "Neither do we," the technician replied with a relaxed grin. "We're still figuring ourselves out." That made a few humans nearby laugh in agreement. The commander stepped back and looked around at the other workers and travelers who were watching the conversation. He could sense the relief in the air and the respect people now had for the technician. Even though he had stumbled and misunderstood the situation, the technician's calm reaction had kept everything peaceful. "I believe I owe you an apology," the commander said with sincerity. "I reacted before understanding your customs." The technician nodded. "And I should have explained my warning more clearly. So, no harm done." The commander placed a hand on his chest, a gesture of respect among his species. "You have taught me something today." "What's that?" the technician asked. "That strength does not always speak loudly," the commander said. "Sometimes it speaks quietly." The technician didn't know what to say to that. Compliments always made him a little awkward, so he simply nodded and scratched the back of his neck. The commander then glanced at the large, mechanical pod he had arrived with. It was filled with fragile items from his homeworld, delicate crystals, cultural artifacts, and tiny tools shaped from rare minerals. He had been worried about the inspection earlier, which was what caused the misunderstanding in the first place. "My cargo needs to be checked," he said softly. "May I trust that you will handle it with care?" "Of course," the technician replied. "I'll handle it personally." The commander bowed his head, a gesture that surprised everyone. It wasn't something his species did easily. Respect for them was usually shown through powerful gestures. But lowering his head was the highest sign of trust he could give. The technician bowed his head slightly in return, honoring the moment as he walked toward the cargo scanner. The workers watched with new appreciation. They didn't see him as just a technician anymore. They saw him as someone who understood people deeply, even when their cultures were completely different. A small alien child peeked from behind a container and whispered to its parent, "Humans are brave." The parent nodded, brave in a quiet way. Nearby, two diplomats talked softly. "It is no wonder humans adapt so quickly," one said. "They understand emotion even when others hide it," the other replied. The technician approached the cargo pod and ran his hand gently across the panel. He typed a few commands and activated the inspection sequence. The machine hummed softly, scanning the items inside without touching them. The commander watched, impressed. "Your machines are gentle too." "We try," the technician said. A moment passed, then another. Everything inside the pod was in perfect condition. No damage, no issues. The technician gave a thumbs up. "All clear," he said. The commander let out a breath of relief. "Thank you." As the technician handed him the approval tag, the commander paused and said, "When I first saw you, I thought you were small." The technician laughed. "I still am." "No," the commander said firmly. "Not anymore." The technician didn't know how to respond, but the sincerity in the alien's voice made him feel strangely proud. The crowd slowly dispersed, returning to their work. But the story of what they had witnessed spread quietly across the station. How a human, without force, without anger, and without fear, had turned a tense moment into understanding. And somewhere deep inside the station's busy heart, the galaxy learned one more thing about humans. Their greatest strength wasn't in their muscles, or their size, or their technology, it was in their ability to stay calm. Even when everything around them was not. The docking bay slowly calmed down. But something in the air had changed permanently. People walked around normally again, carrying tools, fixing panels, guiding small cargo bots. But every now and then, someone would look at the technician with a different expression, like they were seeing him for the first time. Not just as a worker or a human, but as someone who had shown what humans were truly capable of without raising a hand or using any force. Word spread faster than anyone expected. Space stations were always full of gossip, but this story traveled in a way that even surprised the crew. It moved from one worker to another, then from the workers to the pilots, then from the pilots to the visitors, and soon it reached every corner of the station. Some told the story correctly. Others added their own flavor to it. I heard he could sense danger before it happened. One alien said in a corridor. No, no, another corrected. He moved like water, like he knew the future. A third alien leaned in, whispering. I heard he didn't even blink. The technician overheard some of these dramatic versions and rubbed his forehead, wondering how people could exaggerate so fast. But he wasn't angry. In a way, it was funny, and also a little embarrassing. Meanwhile, the alien commander walked through the station with a completely new attitude. His steps were steadier, calmer. He wasn't stomping or raising his voice like before. He had learned a lot from that brief moment in the docking bay, and it showed that, in fact, other aliens approached him out of curiosity. Is it true the human reacted before you moved? One asked. The commander took a deep breath and replied with a softer tone than usual. It is true that humans notice things quickly, but what impressed me more was not the speed, it was the calmness. Another alien blinked. Calmness? During a misunderstanding? Yes, the commander said. They do not rush to anger. They think. They warn. They give space. This answer surprised many aliens. Most species in the galaxy expected humans to be loud or unpredictable or overly emotional. But now they were hearing a different picture. Humans were instinctive, yes, but thoughtful. Quick, yes, but controlled. And above all, respectful even in stressful situations. Later that day, the technician went to the cafeteria to grab something simple to eat. He was hungry and tired from the long day, and all he wanted was a quiet corner. He chose a small table near the wall, hoping nobody would recognize him or talk about what had happened. Of course, that didn't work. A small group of engineers from 3 different species approached him shyly. Excuse us, one of them said. Can we sit with you? He nodded politely. Sure, go ahead. They sat down carefully, as if they were afraid of disturbing him. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then one of the younger engineers finally gathered the courage. Is it true you warned the commander with only a few short words? She asked. The technician sighed softly. I wasn't trying to be dramatic. I just wanted him to stop. But you stayed so calm, another engineer said. Most people would panic. I wasn't calm, the technician admitted. Inside, I was nervous. But I didn't want anything bad to happen. That honest sentence made the group fall quiet. They weren't expecting that answer. It felt real, human, and relatable. After a moment, the young engineer asked, how do humans stay so aware? The technician thought for a bit before answering. I don't think we do it on purpose. Our world teaches us. The environment is harsh. Animals are fast. Weather changes suddenly. If we're not paying attention, we get hurt. One alien engineer nodded slowly. Your world shapes your instincts. Exactly, he said. But we also learn to care, to watch out for other people, to stop trouble before it starts. Another engineer smiled. We could use more of that. The conversation continued casually, nothing dramatic, nothing heroic. Just simple, honest talk. And as the technician spoke, more aliens around the cafeteria began listening quietly. Even those sitting far away leaned in just a little, but nothing he said felt like a speech. He was simply sharing who he was, and through him, who humans were. Later, the commander approached the table. Everyone paused, unsure how this meeting would go. The technician stood up respectfully, remembering how the commander valued body language. I wanted to thank you again, the commander said. You could have embarrassed me or argued, but you chose peace. The technician shook his head. No need to thank me. We all make mistakes. The commander placed a hand gently on the table, a sign of honesty in his culture. I told my people about our encounter. They wish to meet more humans now. The technicians around the table exchanged glances. Why? One asked. Because we misunderstand humans, the commander said. We think they are unpredictable because they feel deeply. But now we know your emotions do not weaken you. They guide you. That comment surprised even the technician. The commander continued. And your warnings? They are not threats. They are invitations to understand. A soft buzz of murmurs filled the cafeteria. Many aliens nodded in agreement. The technician smiled awkwardly. He wasn't used to being the center of attention. He preferred fixing things in the background, not standing under a spotlight. But if his small action had helped even a little, then maybe it was good that people were talking. That evening, a message spread across the station's communication channels. It came from the diplomatic wing, and people quickly gathered around screens to read it. The message was simple. Human cooperation has increased understanding between species. Further cultural exchange is encouraged for harmony. Some aliens read the announcement and felt excited. Others felt curious. A few even felt inspired. But they all felt something new: trust. That same night, the technicians sat on the outdoor platform, the part of the station where people went to see the stars. The view outside was peaceful. Distant suns blinked softly like tiny candles in the dark. Ships drifted by quietly, leaving trails of light. As he sat there, the commander joined him again. They didn't speak at first. They simply watched the stars. After a while, the commander said, "Do humans always give warnings like that? The countdown?" The technician chuckled. "Not always. Some people count when they're trying to stay patient. Like when a kid refuses to clean their room." The commander looked confused. "And does counting help?" "Sometimes," the technician said with a grin. "Sometimes not." The commander laughed, a deep rumbling sound. "Perhaps I should count more often." The technician nodded. "It gives a moment to think." After a long pause, the commander said something unexpected. "You humans, you change things, even when you don't mean to." "How?" the technician asked quietly. "You bring clarity," the commander replied. "Other species try to look strong, but humans try to stay balanced. Calm when needed, bold when needed. You do not rush to violence, but you do not run from danger. You try to understand. That is rare." The technician didn't know what to say. Compliments always made him uncomfortable. The commander continued, "My people will hear my full report, and I will tell them that humans are not a threat, unless someone forces them to be." The technician blinked, unsure how to respond. "But more than that," the commander said gently, "I will tell them humans are friends worth having." The technician smiled softly, warmly. "I'd like that." As the commander stood to leave, he paused. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" the technician asked. "For showing the galaxy what a human really is." The commander walked away, leaving the technician alone with the quiet stars. He looked out into the endless dark space and breathed slowly. He didn't think he had done anything special that day. He didn't think he had changed anything. He had simply reacted the way he believed was right, calmly, respectfully, thoughtfully. But sometimes the galaxy didn't need a hero with armor or a giant ship. Sometimes it only needed a regular human with steady hands and a clear heart, and that was enough.